Hello, and welcome to Runkle of the Bailey. My name is Ian Runkle. I'm a Canadian criminal defense and firearms lawyer. I want to talk about a case that's in the Toronto Star. The headline is Toronto Woman's Murder Charge Withdrawn in Strongest Case of Self-Defense I've Ever Seen in 30 Years. I'm linking the article in the description below. Go read it. It'll give you a more full description of what's going on than I can in this video. I'm going to quote some portions. I'm going to summarize some portions, but read the full article. It's excellent reporting. So what happens here as a broad overview? A woman by the name of Chelsea Arcarakas is banging on a neighbor's door. She's seriously injured at this point. She's got injuries to her face. She's got injuries to her neck. She's got injuries to her ribs. She's barely able to breathe. The neighbors later said that there was so much blood they thought it was a Halloween costume, that this couldn't be real. So she asked them to call 911. She tells them, "He was trying to kill me." Police respond to the scene. They find her. She is, as mentioned, in a real bad state. She's barely able to breathe. She gets rushed off to hospital. They find her ex-boyfriend, and he's been stabbed in the leg, and that stab wound ultimately has proved fatal because there are major blood vessels in the leg. He bleeds out. They say that even if there'd been a surgeon on hand, that single stab wound was enough to kill him. They couldn't have repaired this in time because, femoral artery is a really big deal. So remember that the next time somebody says, "Oh, the police should just shoot people in the leg." Well, no. Leg shots can be plenty fatal, as was seen in this case. So the police then charge her with second-degree murder. She spends a month in jail. And remember, this is a month in jail where she's recovering from serious injuries. She's just been released from the hospital to go directly to jail. When you're thinking about where you want to be recovering from serious injuries, you're thinking probably in a hospital bed, or at home where maybe you can have friends take care of you, or, at the very least, it's a restful, relaxing environment where you can try to recover. Jail is not a great situation, not a great place to try to recover from injuries. Some of the injuries she sustained in the course of this altercation, there was a struggle for the knife. She gets stabbed, or she gets slash wounds across her hand because she's trying to hold on to this knife. She's trying to make sure he doesn't get it, because he's trying to do serious injuries to her, and if he gets this knife, she's probably going to die. So she's hanging onto this knife. She gets cut wounds across her hand. She's a tattoo artist, apparently, and so this is her livelihood. If her hand doesn't recover properly, she doesn't work. So all of this is a big deal. Not only does her having to recover in jail, not only is it inconvenient, is it traumatic, is it destructive to her life, but it also potentially endangers her health. So she, as mentioned, spends a month in jail, and then 4 months later, the charges are withdrawn. I also want to mention here, she doesn't provide a statement initially to the police. That is smart. She provides a statement sometime later after she's released, when she has an opportunity to talk to a lawyer, and you can always make a statement later. You don't have to make a statement at the time. So nothing wrong there. That was commendable. Now, so the police rushed to lay this charge, and now this charge has been withdrawn, and in somewhat of an unusual step, the Crown has provided detailed reasons as to why they withdrew that. And I kind of want to commend them for providing the reasons. The reason why I want to commend them for that is that the initial reports of this just basically say, woman stabs ex-boyfriend, he dies, she's charged with second-degree murder. I wouldn't want that, if I were her, to be the top search when you're looking for jobs. You want it. So these articles will hopefully help clear her name. If I was her, I'd probably print these out and take them to any future job interviews, so that when they say, "Hey, we looked you up," you can say, "Oh yeah, here." You might even want to include those with applications. But I will say, even just the initial report of her having been arrested for second-degree murder, she's probably going to miss out on some job opportunities down the road, simply because if you've got two viable candidates and one of them has never been charged with murder, it seems like, people are going to leap to conclusions on that and make their own choices. So there's a number of quotes here that I kind of want to pick out. They say that the Crown says that the police were justified in arresting and charging Arcarakas that night, and they say that police should be congratulated for demonstrating precisely how our system ought to work, to secure the truth and not a conviction. Well, I have some notes on, some thoughts on that. Is it precisely how our system ought to work that a woman who is nearly murdered by her boyfriend spends a month in jail? That she, is facing these serious charges? That doesn't seem like that's how our system ought to work. Yeah, so they note, and this is a description from the Crown that I'm quoting here. Soon after Ms. Zakarakas' arrival, he violently attacked her, beating her with his fist, dragging her by her hair, biting her, and banging her face on the basement floor. During the assault, which lasted some duration, Ms. Zakarakas used a folding pocket knife to reach back and strike Mr. Manchis while he was restraining her by laying on top of her and choking her with a scarf. So he's choking her out, and she manages to get a hold of this knife and stabs him in the leg. That's what we're talking about here. Now, we've got, let's sort of dial this back and think about this if you are the police here. The police come to this situation. They can see that she's badly injured. They can see the nature of the wound that he's got, that it's a leg injury, and that it almost certainly, thinking of the geometry in terms of him being on top of her and strangling her, where she would have been able to stick him, it's not going to be a frontal stab wound as you might see in, an attack. It's going to be something from the side or reaching around from the back. So you've got that angle of injury. You've also got, just, and I don't mean to be sexist here, but just looking at the gender of these two people, you've got the woman here who's badly injured, and the guy. I feel like this plays in. I mean, there is some correlation here. That's not to say that women can't ever be the aggressors, or that they aren't the aggressors in a number of situations, but this is still a factor to consider. I also understand that Mr. Manchis had a record. He's got a number of sort of past altercations, past allegations, so I feel like that might weigh into your decisions there. He had apparently ripped out her piercings and chunks of her hair. She had 2 black eyes. She had a broken nose. She had bite marks. So this is pretty horrific injuries, right? I feel like we should also take a second and just have a little look at Mr. Manchis. Now, I don't want to leap to too many conclusions here, but he's got a number of crudely done tattoos, so inexpertly done tattoos, all in ballpoint ink colors. That looks to me like prison ink. You see a guy who's covered in prison ink, I feel like that also weighs into your self-defense calculations here. All of this, the Crown says, hey, or it was noted, this is the strongest case of self-defense in 30 years. I'm sorry, that wasn't the Crown. That was actually defense counsel who said that. And quite frankly, this is an incredibly strong self-defense case. And it was as of day one. As of the initial moment, all of the indicators here sound like self-defense. So why the rush to charge her with second-degree murder? Why are we going to charge her first thing when there's all of these indications that this is a self-defense altercation? You can always wait. Just for the record, some people might say, hey, listen, the police have to act fast because, there's a statute of limitations. Well, the statute of limitations for second-degree murder is never. The earth will one day fall into the sun and obliterate all of the works of humankind on this planet. And you could still prosecute a second-degree murder right up until that point, assuming that the people involved were alive. So, there is no hurry. You can always lay the charges later. Well, what about needing evidence? Well, none of this happens at her house. I'm sure the police have secured the scene, and she's in the hospital. I mean, you could put an officer sitting there waiting just to make sure she doesn't rush back to the scene, with a bottle of bleach or something to try to contaminate it. But you don't need to necessarily take her into custody. She doesn't need to go to jail. Some restraint here would have been a really great thing. And I kind of feel like we have, the Crown says the public deserves an explanation, especially in these rarest of occasions where the justification for an insufficient reasonable prospect of conviction flows from self-defense. Yeah, I mean, we do deserve, an explanation here. I don't think that it's the rarest of occasions that self-defense justifies not proceeding with charges. In fact, I think that the police might proceed with charges a little too often in situations that kind of scream out self-defense. Mr. Ian Thompson, if you want to look him up, that's a case where I think maybe the Crown should have, and the police should have said, hey, you know, maybe we don't need to lay charges here, at least not yet. I want to consider a bit of an alternate hypothetical, which is, let's say she doesn't get a hold, or let's say she gets a hold of the knife, she stabs him, but he doesn't die. And, you know, so he lets go of her, he goes to deal with his wounds, she escapes. And I think it would have been very, very unlikely that she would have been charged in the event that Mr. Manchis was not dead. I think that they absolutely would have wanted to charge him and had her as a witness. So if he lives, she probably walks out of this with no charges. But the police are always happier to mark concluded by charge on a file. So because he's dead, somebody's got to get charged, and it might as well be her. This is a fundamental problem in how policing happens. We don't necessarily need to charge somebody right away. We can take the time, we can think about it. Because they say, oh, well, it's great that the police, you know, continued their investigation, and after 4 months, they figured out what happened, and now, you know, we know we can withdraw the charges. Do you think maybe you could have waited and done the 4-month investigation and then decided to charge her or not charge her? You know, she could have recovered at her home in bed or at the hospital. She didn't have to spend that month in jail. So before everyone involved on the Crown's end or the police end spends too much time patting themselves on the back and saying, we did a good job, you should think, did you really? I mean, she spent a month in jail. I know I've repeated this a number of times, but I don't think I can repeat it enough times. It's really difficult to conceptualize how traumatic a month in jail is going to be for the victim of a very serious, very serious attack like this. So sometimes I think we need to spend a little bit more time asking questions like, well, are we really sure that this is what happened? You know, could we be wrong? And just the fundamental question of, are we the baddies here? This is a reference to a famous Mitchell and Webb skit. You should look it up, you know, Mitchell and Webb, Are We the Baddies? Have a look for it if you've never seen it before. But this is a question we need to ask ourselves in the justice system a little bit more often. You know, what side, you know, if you're a police officer or if you're the Crown and you're looking at a file like this, you should maybe ask yourself, what side have I chosen to take on this file? Whose side am I on? Because up until the end, where they're withdrawing the charges, they were on the side of the person who, in the Crown statement, is the aggressor, is the bad guy. They were on team bad guy, and they finally figured it out. We need to get off team bad guy. But I will tell you, the Crown getting off team bad guy doesn't make her life much better. The charges go away, but if she had never been charged in the first place, she's not ahead of the game by those charges being withdrawn. And frankly, these charges, based on what's been reported, why would you ever want to take that to trial? Like, the Crown isn't going to want to embarrass themselves in this trial. So, yeah, I don't put a whole lot of weight in the charges went away in terms of improving her life. Every portion of her life that's been affected by the decisions made is worse. You know, she spent that month in jail. Are you going to give that back to her? Can you give that back to her? I don't think she's going to come away from any of this with any sort of compensation. She's not likely to be, you know, paid out for this. She's not likely to get anything back to make her whole. All she's going to be doing is just trying to recover from what's happened to her. And quite frankly, the police and the Crown don't appear to have picked the right side on this one. And yeah, I get, you know, they're saying second-degree murder is serious business, but in these clear self-defense cases, I would love to see people stop and say, maybe we can do this tomorrow. Maybe we can finish our investigation. You know, she's not going anywhere. Anyway, I guess those are my thoughts. This is one of those cases that just really infuriates me. To see people saying, "Oh, well, we've done such a good thing now in withdrawing these charges." And I'm going, no. I mean, her life is worse off for every bit that's happened here. It's a sad state, and yeah, I'm gonna leave it off here. Thank you for watching. I would say I hope you enjoyed this, but I don't think this is an enjoyment kind of video. I hope you've learned something. I just kind of also needed to vent my feelings on this one, and so thank you for listening. Please, if you like this video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share this video with your friends. I also want to thank my Patreon subscribers at the $50 level: Sir Daniel Wicks of Alberta, Jason Elliott, Demo, Canada's National Firearms Association, North Central Process Service, Kyle Martin, Jean-Guy Toussaint, Ivo Nedev, the CCFR, BCAMF.org, Andrew Schaefer, and the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. At the $30 level, Sights and Arms Limited and Marc-Olivier Damour. And at the $20 level, Matt Ward, Mark Whittington, Dale Nesbitt, Cameron Johnson, Andrew Elsich, and Adam Meester. This is such a frustrating... And I mean, let's talk a little bit, I guess, in the postscript about what it means to be a defense lawyer. Because sometimes as a defense lawyer, you will be arguing for the guy to be getting out on bail. And, I'm not going to apologize for that. That's part of what the job is. He deserves an advocate in his court. But sometimes you get to be the person on her side as well. So you get to be the person defending Chelsea Arcarakas. And absent the defense lawyer, nobody's going to be there speaking up for her. In theory, the Crown is supposed to be representing, the interests of justice and looking out for victims. But she's the victim here. And sometimes the court system doesn't, sometimes the police, sometimes the Crown, sometimes our giant engine of imperfect justice doesn't get it right. And so sometimes as a defense lawyer, you will be in the situation of tremendous privilege of being able to help these people out. So, I mean, yeah, this file is one of those things that just, it fills me with upset. I'm unhappy with what happened here. There is no way to make it right. This is an injustice on the universe that cannot be fixed. And frankly, nobody's even going to try to fix it from here on. There just isn't any way to repair this. But I'm glad at least that the damage has been stopped. That's where this sits. The wound has been sort of patched over, but this will always be a scar on the universe. Anyway, I've probably said enough. Thank you for watching. I hope this has armed you with knowledge. See you next time.